So with that, I welcome to the panel, the panelists. So thank you. I mean, I think it's been a really inspiring and interesting day so far. So we will continue on that. And so I'd like to ask you. So we've been touching upon it about the current. It's hard to not do it. The current geopolitical situation. So what are the most important steps to take right now in order to accelerate that transformation to get a safe and just future? And this is a very broad, but from each of your background, how do you, I mean, we all discuss this all the time, I guess, and like I think Perry saying, you can't open the paper without you start to process in your head and you start to think, what is this? Because it's, I don't know if it's transformation, but it's something happening at least that, and we're still in a waking up phase, I believe. And so, yeah. So, what do you think? What are the most important steps to take right now? Where you are? Anyone want to start?
Well, I can start.
Yeah.
While you are thinking of some smart questions. Just to give an anecdote, we're working on a project on blue carbon in Vietnam and Cambodia. So we need a lot of data from NOAA, which is an American data center that collects very important data from meteorological and a lot of data, but also ocean data. And our science colleagues have been in a phase now where they are sitting day and night to download all the data from this center because it's closing down. Mm-hmm. So it has a very, strong impact on not only on American scientists but also all over the world because we are so interconnected in this. One thing that we can do is actually in one way or another trying to support our American colleagues, which are now very confused in what is happening, and keep up the connections to all of them, but also to of course try to strengthen the role of science, to make science more visible and as we've talked about today, how can we actually deliver a result that can be used in politics and make sense of that? So I think that's, on the personal level, what we can do. But you probably have smaller ideas.
It's really a tricky question. What is the most important?
It can be some of the most important.
Some of the most important. That matters. Yeah. No, but I try to repeat the importance of framing issues in a way that makes sense for people, and also see that transformative change is an option and is a possibility, not in a determinate way, but it's a possibility which hopefully will be a way to create a better world for all, or for most people. A better for all, but maybe not the welfare for all, because we need to include that about a just transformation. So, because there are so many messages that are circulating on social media and in media and in different ways to try to say that this is a dead end. Not least today, when we have this polycrisis, that it's suddenly just come in the shadow, this transformative change, the sustainability transformation. Yeah, thank you.
Before I move over to Karen and Per, will you think that this looking back, you think this will be considered transformation? What we have said, because transformation doesn't have to be positive necessarily, but isn't it so, Karen?
Well, transformative change doesn't. We are going through a transformative change, but that's why we made it very deliberately towards a just and sustainable future. So this will, this is a transformative change in anything, but whether it will be an enduring one is hopefully not, you know. But that's where I think, you know, from my thing is like, how do we actually go from knowledge to action? That's always been the problem, you know, from the birth of Future Earth and everything. And how do we, like, you know, really engage people? And that's where I think where science can actually bring the success stories and communicate them. Because I was saying in our group that, like, I heard a little video that, like, fear is a very powerful emotion that spreads fast, but inspiration spreads faster. So if we can, maybe it's the same or something, I don't know, I interpret it as faster, but if we can actually, there's so much that's off the radar from in the, like, the mainstream news that we just get like kind of a nervous system shock every time we read the news. But there's also then, like, how do you actually support all this, the good stuff that is going on? And that, I think, is like, when I heard things today, I was like, wow, there is a lot of really good research that can help people and like navigate these things. And to deal with overwhelm, I think action is the best thing, but it's not just any action, but it's like, it is the quality of our agency and how we can design and deliver results. So yeah, I think we have a lot of untapped potential that needs to be uncovered now.
And I guess that there's also to maybe now to help to creating that arena that can come up. I mean, that's maybe that's emerging field to have. Like you say, there's a lot of knowledge out there that isn't passing through the system, really. So that's, that's interesting. Do you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I think it's important how, you know, that you don't contribute to the polarization. Like, you think about, how do I want to show up in the world? How do I want to sort of have conversations and how do I behave in social media, etc. And I think that's a really important part, I think, and just not contributing to that polarization, but I actually find ways, as you said, also the how can I be part of creating the spaces where we can meet in a different way, maybe sort of based on dignity, etc., and other ways of showing up. And I think that we talk about citizen assemblies here, and sometimes they're looked at, how good they are for democracy, or like evaluated. So how good recommendation did they give to politicians? But it's, I think one of the key things, I think, at least with the one we've been running, is like how it's actually create that space for meeting in a sort of in a way with dignity, you know, where you have a listening approach and also let people speak their mind and without getting jumped on or ridiculed or shamed or something. You know? So I think that's really important.
And that relates quite a bit to some of the things that I think both you had up, the hospice story, and that you need to not increase the polarization is also to be in a dialogue and to not become the polarized yourself, coming with, you know, to how do you frame it something that with dignity. Yeah. To also have the counterpart accepting it in your listening. I that's how I.
And it's not just accepting, but feeling like they belong there, and they have and not just included in someone else's journey. But I think that is important. I just want to make one more point. This about this sort of what's happening now. It's like, and as you said, like transformation, you know, doesn't have to be towards a more open, sustainable and just society. It can be the opposite, but that's also transformation. And let's see. And we see now, we talked about it before, like how fast it can happen, really. Yeah. But and then we think like, well, if it can happen that fast in that direction, you know, or it can happen fast in the direction of sustainability and equity. But I think it's a real danger in moving things fast also, because we know that revolutionary change actually often ripples conflicts into the future. So it just becomes a battle between ideologies over time. So I think it's the challenge is to do it fast, but do it in a way that don't create these sort of, what do you call it, the ridicule, these backlash maybe, but yeah, exactly.
Camilla, sorry, Yeah, Camilla.
Still my name. Yeah. Two things, and I can start with the latter one because this epistemology of crisis is also something that can be quite dangerous.
Can you hear back there, by the way? You hear?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And in particular from an indigenous people's point of view, because what we see now in the northern parts of Sweden with this green transformation or green, so-called green transformation, is that the municipalities and the regions and also the state representatives and so on, they see this as an opportunity to develop, but then they are not at all taking into consideration the rights holders in the area. So that's actually one really strong impact of the green transformation, and you also mentioned that in your talk. So I think that if we're not reflecting upon and take this for granted, so to say, that this dominating epistemology, it can also have very, very sad effects. But the other thing that came to my mind is also the militarization now, the remilitarization, and the focus on competitiveness between different continents and so on. The challenge here, I think, will be that we, for example, with the new focus of the European Commission, is that we actually will downgrade the Green Deal or the ideas behind the Green Deal in favor of the more competitive aspects or ideas, and also then focusing on the remilitarization of the world. And I think that one of our roles here is then to also remind politicians all the time about, competitiveness doesn't necessarily mean that we don't take climate change and biodiversity into consideration. They have to go hand in hand. We need to find the sweet spot between these two. So all the time being that bad conscience or whatever you should call it, to remind people about that. So and that's also related to the epistemology of crisis, so to say. So always remember that it's not fair to wipe out cultures in favor of climate change or establishing.
That's why I think like the underlying causes and the principles of transformative change are really good just to remember. Okay, is this actually is this equity and justice, and does it actually move the needle on relations of domination and power concentration of power and wealth and short-term prioritizations and things. So I think that it's really like that in a crisis you can either shrink or you can grow in terms of like being able to take perspectives, and a lot of people are just shrinking into their tribal selves and scared for good reasons. But then it's like, okay, how as a community can we actually show that there are other options and different ways of being, and highlighting what you're saying, like creating those spaces that are like where we can like expand our perspectives rather than contract.
And I think that's really good aspects, both of them. I think so too, and so that to remind also the other side that like you're saying, because I also think like now it's also used like we have to think strategic in like military terms, etc. So it's a big, it's used as an argument for a lot of stuff. So then you can, the other thing is not important. So I think I take that with me. And then before I let in the audience, and Lisa here has a question. If you think of structural barriers that you've been speaking of today for just transition. Now, what are sort of the biggest barriers? This is tricky, of course, but they're all integrated and interacting. But economic system, political will, or culture norms, you can vote. So, economic system, political will, or culture norms.
Can you separate them?
Yeah.
Sorry?
Can you separate them?
Yeah, I can separate them in my
possible?
paper.
Hard. But maybe the economical system, because we could really make use of or develop economic incentives in a different way, which is not done today.
Okay, yeah. That's your choice. Any other house want to vote?
Yeah, I see them all as interrelated, but I think because our economic system comes from our culture and comes from political will, but I think our economic system is the one that is driving or reinforcing the others.
Yeah, I keep
say the same.
You say the same.
If you want more votes.
Okay.
Because of the it seems like it's the current global economic system have difficulty delivering on justice and sustainability. And Hans Rosling, he showed how the world is getting better, but there are two things that doesn't get better, and that's the have and the have-nots and the sustainability. So I think that when we study how economic systems have transformed throughout history, we know that you have a point where some actors starting to sort of say like this system doesn't deliver on. Last time it was economic stability, and then we changed that system. So I think that's also gives a bit of hope that we can actually. It's a big colossal thing, but we can be changed.
But what I worry about, but I think also that there's a lot of people, and it becomes very clear that there's people who don't care about equity, who don't, like that you can treat or like that really, and that goes into what you were saying about dehumanizing or thinking of people as expendable and things. And so that then comes into power and who has power and who's deciding, because we could be very idealistic, but there are people who really just think that, they will be, like in their bunkers or on Mars or whatever, and which is problematic.
A lot of them have a lot of power right now. So
yeah, exactly.
Rolf, do you have a vote?
Yeah. I also find it's quite difficult to separate too much this, because
that's the academic answer.
But we have, they are, in some sense, they are supporting each other, at least partially, not maybe the cultural sphere, but if you look at the political and economic sphere, of course they are reproducing or supporting each other in a way that is not towards a just transformation. But so I don't.
Okay,
I don't vote at all.
Fair. We still have a winner, so it's okay. But then with economic system, we hear it quite a lot in our global work. It often comes to that. We have to change the economic system, and that holds for, like you said, a just transformation, and for also many of the environmental degradation. I echo what you're saying. With that, I'd like to bring in the audience for a question or two. Anyone has? Here we have a good one.
So I'd like to. I thank you all for very interesting points. My question is how do you? So as a PhD candidate who's trying to get to publish research, right? When you have editors come back to you, and if you're trying to get the word capitalism in there, it is such a hard fight. It's just, or to name capital, it's really. So when you have such powerful gatekeepers at that level, how do you deal with it? Is there,
And what was your name?
Kiran.
Yeah. Thanks. You want to answer directly?
I could answer just from the perspective of the IPBES assessment, because we got that a lot in the review comments. You're about capitalism specifically and things, and so the authors then described it in so many other words, like profit orientation, concentration of equity in so it was like how to say it without saying it in many ways, but describing it. So I think that I'm not sure if that will get through the gatekeepers there, but then you'll probably get another review that goes like, well, why don't you just call it capitalism? And, but it is then that, how do you to just elaborate on what you're exactly talking about, rather than relying on an ism, but what are the factors that are problematic, and so.
It's so easy. Yeah, it's so easy also to that. If you try to talk about something like the economic system, it's like immediately get into an ideological conversation, and then it's like the trenches, and then it's like you shoot at each other rhetorically, and you don't get anywhere. And often, and it's the same with growth and degrowth. It's like it's very locked. So what I think we're doing also with the language and with the science can do also is to say like I know we have a lot of colleagues that works on a growth, like to come up with a concept that's sort of kind of try to hold the middle a bit. We want to explore this, what this is, the growth, but we don't want to end up there or there. And I think that's the same with capitalism and all those. It's like and that's what I like. Earth for All, for example, I think that a lot of their work is trying to hold that middle. So we want to explore this, and we want to explore other models and other systems, but we don't want to we don't want to end up there. So sometimes it's good to keep the language neutral, just to hold that space also.
But I think there are now journals that have opened up for more critical discourses and so forth, where you actually can discuss and open up, or at least open up the discussion. What I find challenging with the linking back to growth and degrowth is that the degrowth agenda doesn't really have an alternative yet. Which means that they are dismissed very easily because they haven't been able to formulate an alternative, and so that's still missing, I think, and that might be a reason. Might be that we haven't been able to talk more openly about different type of alternatives, but maybe with the acknowledgement of different worldviews, like in the IPES, the picture that you showed from, I'm currently working with the Satoyama concept with colleagues in Japan, and seeing that there are different ways of organizing the society, and particularly when you have commons and so forth, that could be that could develop into alternatives, and learning from these different type of worldviews and ways of organizing. But it's still in its infancy, because it's just now that IPES has highlighted these ones and made it more systematically. But I think it's important.
I actually heard an interview on radio. Was an Israeli peace activist who said that, and how it was also in your presentation, I believe, or your that it's so important with having to provide a positive vision. Currently, if you think of the Israel-Palestine conflict, the vision is, apart from one that came recently, the visions are, we don't see any good visions, basically. And this peace activist said that, we are the one that has to come up with something, so because that's what drives change. If you have a vision for something better, then you can make the change. But unless you have that, it's much harder to really channelize the good energy. So that's Well, you want to say something, Rolf?
No, it just relates to that question that it may also be danger if, I really understand and support that choosing other words in this IPES report, but for a scientific publication, I think it's a bit dangerous if you start to consciously not using words that are important for us in our analysis because of we anticipate criticism. And so what is important from a scientific point of view is that it's clearly defined. You can defend just your selection of concepts that you use in your analysis. And then if a reviewer dislike it, then I think it's the editor should in that sense ignore that or give you the opportunity to tell in the response to the reviewers why you nevertheless choose that word. I think that is the scientific attitude, and it's quite important. Otherwise, we have a risk that we cannot use equity, we cannot use just this and so on, and then suddenly we are on wrong track.
It's the editor that's editing it, or gatekeeping that it's a problem.
The editor has a responsibility there.
Björn-Ola and someone
There's hand. Which one were you referring to?
I think you
Present yourself and.
Sure. My name is Therese. That's the presentation, I guess. Camilla, I just have a follow-up question to you, because you said that degrowth hasn't presented any compelling or any alternatives. Can you just elaborate a little bit what you mean about that? Like an alternative to capitalism as a whole system, or?
Yeah, what would the society look like?
I think degrowth is pretty clear about how they imagine society. Like, there are a lot of visions.
Yeah, but it's not really. I would say that it has to be formulated more comprehensively to be able to compete with the dominant view. I mean, there are a lot of different aspects and so forth, but as long as there's no real, to say, I don't know if I can express it in English, but I mean, we've also tried to look into this and see how can we define it? What is it that they actually strive for? And of course there are principles and so on, but it's not really competing with the dominant view yet, and something that can be presented to the public. It's more like really strong ideologies that are connected to, or activism that are connected to it, but it seems to scare people away, and that's a challenge for. I mean, if we want transformation from a welfare society that is built on capitalism, so what would be the alternative? How so that you don't scare people away by just talking about it. So. Sorry, I didn't manage to express it very well, but I haven't found it yet, at least.
Yeah. Björn-Ola, you have a question.
Well, I had a comment first. I also have a question. Can I have both? Or?
Yes.
But I think your points there about sort of not avoiding is but treated as a scientific issue. But I also want to add then to what Karen said, because I think what was beautifully done in the IPBES report was to define what in capitalism is it that is the underlying causes for the crisis. And that's much more analytically productive also than just, I mean, capitalism is a broad chart, right? It can be from laissez-faire to more socially aware. So just capitalism is not so analytically precise. So it's much better to then look at these underlying causes, which I think was cleverly and also productively done in the IPBES report. Yeah, but my comment, no, sorry, that was my comment. That was my question, is I think this has been super interesting, so thanks a lot. One thing that sort of bothers me right now is that I was at the UNDP's the colloquium for the 30th anniversary of the Human Development Report, where they showed the data from the latest development report, emphasizing how the insecurity in the world, the growing insecurity, both in low, middle, and high income countries are growing, and how that could be correlated to the growing appreciation for authoritarian leaders that can undermine democracy. So the support for democracy is virtually the same. It has dipped a little bit in the last 20 years, but just a little. But the appreciation for authoritarian leaders has surged enormously, and it's easy to, in their data, to correlate that to those who feel insecure. They have a higher sort of support for these authoritarian leaders, but those in societies, in all these three societies, that feel secure have a very low appreciation for the authoritarian leaders. And the most pronounced difference is in the high-income countries. So it's a difference in all countries, but it's most pronounced in the high-income countries. Which worries me, because we also know that in times, we talked about this in our group, in times of disruptive times, that creates a window of opportunity for transformative change, because you can't go on as you have done. You question sort of the way that you run things, the way that you live your life, or how society is organized. So I refer to my favorite historian, William Sewell, who has said that you can see this historically, that not always, but often the transformative it creates an opportunity for transformation with revolutions, wars, pandemics, or disruptive technologies and so on. So we know that that could create an opportunity. But at the same time, we see that the opposite, right? That the insecurity that these disruptive times creates also, well, maybe transformation, but not from a democratic point of view, very troublesome. So my question to you, how should we solve this? Is there a trick on how to avoid that these disruptive times becomes a backlash, but we actually can create them into windows of opportunity? You talk about this, Per, but I think you all have knowledge that can contribute to help me get some hope here.
Yeah.
Long question.
Well, there is some interesting studies of crisis and transformation, and we've been going on for quite a while, that looks at both, what do you do if you have a crisis like the Boxing Day tsunami, for example, and how it played a role in moving from war to peace in the Aceh province of northern Sumatra in Indonesia, and but it also then there's a specific thing that has to be there during that crisis that actually makes it into a transformative process. So the people have looked at that, but also looked at how was the system prepared before the crisis. So how close was it to that peace, before the crisis happened? Because in Sri Lanka, it was a very different outcome of the tsunami, where the warring parties, the government and the separatists, had a similar conflict as in Aceh, but in Sri Lanka it actually deepened the conflict. The tsunami actually deepened the conflict, and so it's interesting to get into those details and see why did it lead to one thing in one place and something else in the other place. So I think that's and then sometimes you have then not maybe a crisis, but sort of moving from apartheid in South Africa to a sort of democracy, but a more democratic society. You had the 4 years of writing the new constitution between 1990 and 1994, and more people died in those 4 years in violent conflict than any 4-year period during apartheid. So it shows that moment that is so volatile is that sort of the in-between, and when systems are in limbo and you actually you're moving into another one. So that's where people can start to fight, but also there is competing, we call it competing latent attractors, that there are many different narratives of where to take it. When you have the opportunity, here's an opportunity. Well, it's not just one idea that is sort of is proliferate. It's like it's a crowding of ideas coming up there because we're going to do in this way, and then it could build on fear, It could be that leaders in that space taking that opportunity to actually build on fear of people and actually take it in a very, very, something like problematic direction. So I think it's many things, many outcomes, many different ways can happen, but it's a really interesting field of study, I think.
Great answer. Okay, let me follow up. No, I think that we kind of delude ourselves if we think that we can have a world that works for some and not others through whatever transitions and transformations that we're going to do, that there will be because if if we have these visions of the future, but in the background we have lots of dead bodies or people who aren't that. In Norway, the Prime Minister was like, oh my gosh, climate change is going to bring more. One of the right party leaders saying that climate change will bring in more migration. We need to have fix our borders and everything, not to recognize the responsibility that we are actually responsible for a lot of displacement and everything. So I think that where like we start, and I think that's been a failure that we've had poverty. There, like almost a billion people hungry, going to bed hungry every night. So what kind of a world is that? And going to the authoritarianism, we have to recognize that, like, in terms of worldviews, many people still have a very hierarchical worldview, the socialized mind. This is the way life is, and then of course an authoritarian leader, whatever they will say, will sound very attractive, rather than as you go develop the self-authoring mind, which could still be problematic, like I decide, I do this, and then to be able to be reflexive and say, like, oh wait, maybe I'm not being very fair or something. So that in terms of human development, we have to like recognize that many people are looking for someone to take, like that strict answer, and democracy seems, feels very like inefficient. And that's why I think the core is to make people feel secure in the first place, so that they don't have to look to some demagogue or populist to provide fake answers.
And I sympathize with what Björn and Karen said, and what maybe I add is that there are also organized interests that make use of this situation to exploit the insecurity and uncertainty in people's life. So it's not only something happens in crisis, and people or actors know that and can use that in different ways to support their way of trying to push society in a certain direction.
Yeah, I mean, what we know from research on elections is that it is parties or party leaders that actually have a vision that also wins the elections. And if you have a party leader, authoritarian, with an authoritarian view, that actually have a vision to make it more or certain for people that actually talk about the economy and so on for the broader mass, that person will also win. I mean, that was very clear with, well, except that she was a woman, of course, in both the last elections in the US, that they didn't talk about the economy. And they didn't talk about the development. They didn't have a vision. It should stay as it was. And by protecting what is not going to win an election. So I mean, with the politicians, many democratic politicians becoming more and more reactive and not having a vision, that's actually dangerous. And opening the floor for those who have a vision, which might not be very democratic.
That's really interesting. Lisa, I think you have a question or something.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up, build on the visions, and I was also impressed that you have assessed like 800 visions in the IPBES assessments. Wonderful how many visions there actually are out there. And I wanted to also say that the Earth Commission, which Future Earth is hosting, is an interdisciplinary science commission working to both like define what is the safe and just space that we want to go to, and also now looking more into how can we actually go there, like exploring the transformation pathways, both like bringing social scientists together with modelers to develop narratives, but also quantify them. But the question to you is then, so how can we as scientists or researchers bring those visions to politicians and policymakers, stakeholders, without, being told that, oh, this is just utopian nonsense, like, yeah. I don't know if that was a well-phrased question, but maybe you have some reflections. How do we take the visions to politics and to action?
Yeah, I guess it's about realistic utopias, like Eric Olin Wright has written about, that, like that we make them, that they're not like way off, but that it's like, wow, could you, like that we are like, bring it to the values that people care about, actually show what's possible and what's emerging and everything, and show, because often the visions, as you know, in terms of imagination and things. The visions aren't like always like, I mean, you have science fiction on things, but it's often based on what we know. And if you do a visioning exercise, you often realize like a lot of that exists right now, and we just need more of it. You know, like how like that there is a lot of what we want here, and we don't have to reinvent everything. And so how do we do that? And then to maybe one way to communicate the vision is by, you know, telling the compelling stories and narratives and in the framings and things, because I think like that I've been inspired by all the talks, but like the Lions, like, wow, there's, you know, like you see to open up for possibilities helps other people to see the possibilities in front of them, whether they're policymakers or practitioners, teachers, whatever. So the good stories need to travel.
Anyone else want to refer? I mean, I guess some of you also have experience of it, of speaking to policymakers and see what has worked and hasn't worked. I mean, like.
Well, I think it's I see it a bit problematic of bringing a vision to someone and not including them. So I think it's one of the things is being included. Being included in forming the vision. And I think because it's when we talk in our imagination work when we talk about there's, I mean, inclusive imagination. There's what do you call them? A participatory scenario planning, which is an old, fairly old field now, and where they try to work differently, maybe with this, and we also have a project called African Futures, you know, to also with Laura Pereira that puts the focus on the issue of who gets to be involved in imagining the future. So I think that's so I think it's as much as possible. I think it's important to involve people, but I think there is some, and just put it out there, I think there is some value also to do these sort of more scientific scenario, but the whole challenge then is to how did that get integrated or sort of what do you do with that than just bring it to someone else.
And how do you capture the qualitative dimensions that are not measurable? And I think that was one of the knowledge gaps in the assessment, is like indicators of transformative change, especially the kind of ones that are in the views and that are more related to the beliefs and values, etc. Because what we measure is what we actually end up moving, and we could end up with very false scenarios that are missing pieces of like social change and revolutions and things if we don't have the right metrics or data to put in.
I'm not a person that are able to communicate visions to policymakers, but I think it's important to communicate crisis awareness, that the current situation is unsustainable and there is a need for change, and that there are options for change. To argue against this kind of impossibilities, which is so common to meet, that we cannot do anything, or Sweden cannot do anything, or this community or I as an individual cannot do anything, which means that that's the language of status quo. And I think that is quite important. And then exactly which visions I don't know, but at least that open up a space for action and the possibilities. That I think is so important, and a responsibility for me as a researcher. But then the visions, maybe it's someone else and myself that would develop.
So looking at the time, I know that Per wanted to have another comment, but I would suggest that you, if there's any question that needs to be heard, please say it now. Otherwise, out of respect of time, I know there is some transport going from Stockholm.
One up there.
Where?
Up there. Yeah.
Ah.
Maybe this is not a great way to end, because I feel it could be a lot. So it's something we could just think about and talk about later. But you know, I'm sometimes struggling because I'm with Per on the sort of, you know, sort of middle ground and opening up for conversation because of the polarization that we see exists right? And we're in a deadlock. Where do we go from there? But I also can see how, you know, efforts to transform things that just bring people together, have like a plurality of views, and just talk, right? How those can also be spaces in which, you know, equity, certain voices that need to be highlighted, have been disproportionately affected by some of these issues. Because I also think things need to transform a lot more for some people than others, right? Because of the reality we live in. You know, how do we like deal with that sort of tension where you know we're doing research, our research might be saying that it's good to have dialogue, talk about these things, have the supermarket there, have the politician there, have the indigenous person there, everyone comes together and it's kumbaya, we talk about things. But transformative change is about equity and justice. Like the IPBES assessment has that as one of the key things that needs to be there. So I'm just wondering, I'm doing research in South Africa, in the food system, and there's a history there, apartheid, land distribution that was very unfair. Yeah, so I'm just I guess my question is like, how do we deal with that in terms of like researchers in transformation? Like, what's our positionality? How do we like navigate that? And how do we do that in a just and equitable way?
And your name?
Anil. And I'm 4 months into my PhD at the Stockholm Resilience Center. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So with that, I mean, now given time, and I know there are some people traveling from Stockholm, believe it or not. So I would suggest that we give each of you a sort of concluding remarks, and then include your comment, Per, and your question if you can fit it in. So Per, you want to start?
No, I've forgotten what I was supposed to say. My comment, so that's fine. But I can say, well, I can just do a quick reflection on that. I think it's really important. We talked about it in our group. That was so much of our conversation in our group, is how do we act as researchers? And I think that there's no short answer to that, but I think it's just challenging for a lot of researchers to act differently in the world, in this transdisciplinary field. So what I can say, like, it's really important that we as scientists reflect on that role and find new ways of being in these spaces. I think it's super important. And then there's probably 100 ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that was your conclusion?
Was good. Yeah, perfect. I'm good.
Yeah.
Karen?
But I think that in response to that, it's what you said earlier, like deep listening, giving people that space to be heard and speaking responsibly, so as a researcher and everything, and in some ways going to like getting out of our expertise mindset for a little and just being very human and connecting. I've seen that, like my students, PhD students working in with indigenous communities and things, when they meet as human beings, it's like the head of the community came to her PhD defense, and it was very like it was just such a very relational type of thing, and I think that we can take a relational approach to research and kind of honor that as well. So and that might be what we really need right now, because more of like getting to people's heads is like we can like just keep putting in more data and more maps and more models and things like that. But at the end of the day, what is it that is going to move in a very like tense situations that we're in right now?
Great.
But that takes practice.
Good, thanks, Karen. Rolf, do you have?
Hard to conclude with something, but I think my main mission is towards students to have a realistic understanding of the current situation and also the options for change. To not be naive, but neither be determinist, saying that's nothing can be changed. And towards decision makers, I think that as a sociologist, I always need to explain that knowledge per se, knowledge in itself, does not create any change. it's it's very important, but it's so much about norms and emotions and meanings and so on, and that is strangely that is still something that needs to be said.
Yeah.
I would like to link back to one of the groups. I can't remember which one it was, but someone talking about what happens with research projects when they are over. And that's actually something that we are given the model that I present, or the workflow that we have, that to be very, very clear with the ones that we're working with, what is the end point and what is it supposed to lead to. And in this Lion project, we have now handed over to the Maasai themselves to run the project. So the scientists from Sweden and the US that has been involved has now stepped back. We're still there and supporting and building capacity and so on. But it's that's also part of the whole idea, so to not just drop the project. Now we're done, we're publishing our papers, and then we go back home and are safe in our own environment, and you can do whatever you want with the results. That's not what transformative change is about. And then it was another thing, students. I'm also teaching for other teachers at Umeå University, so we have a course about sustainable development and transformative change. And what strikes me when I teach other teachers is that they have such a vague uppfattning, vague understanding of politics and how politics work, and what actually is. I have a case or a role play where they have to save Rapa Nui, the Eastern Island, and developing an Agenda 1500 instead of Agenda 2030. So coming in there around 1450, and we know already. Now we know what went wrong, more or less. But we get in there and we can see that things are clearly going wrong. So how can we save Rapa Nui? And then they are given different roles. And if you don't understand the political system, that it's hard to change them. But they have no idea of policy instruments, even though they are, exposed for policy instruments every day, but they don't know, how to actually change those. So I think that's also something that we need to teach our students. How to run a society, and what type of methods and instruments can you actually use in order to change things. And societal models, linking back to the degrowth discussion.
That's a good comment. From doing research myself, when you come to the end of the article, you just to make policy implication, and then you start to it become like a bingo of guessing kind of. And so that's I think there is something there that have that in more in, and also in the design of the research that you have to also give something back to the local community. I think that's often the money ends and then you go. So I think it's important. So with that, super good. I think you could a big hand of applause to our excellent. There were more to say. Thank you so much. Really excellent panel, interesting public audience. So thank you so much. Now there's the final point on the program, and it's Victoria and Björn-Ola who will do the summing up.
Now we will present the PowerPoint with the summing up. We will start. Well, days like this is we have the best job in the world. I think it's been fantastic. What a rewarding discussion has been from my end. So thanks a lot. We want to thank you all. Thank you for coming. We start with thanking before we wrap up. But we also want to thank everybody that made this possible, from Pierre and Peter Bandén at the Royal Academy. Thank you so much. And we mentioned Jan Pettersson, but also Helene Nordstedt who noticed that
had to leave.
who had to leave to get her kids, thinking about the future, so this that is from this national committee, but it was such a great idea that we teamed up, or we put our brains together with Future Earth, with Lisa Jakobsson and Jakob Lundberg, and also with the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Got it right? Yes, with Martin Eriksson. So it's been delightful to plan this together with you and our panelists, and thank you, Karen, for coming from Norway to share your wisdom. Thank you so much. Who have I forgotten? You. Thank you.
And Rolf and Camilla and Per, of course.
Yeah. Thanks.
Summing up, that's a difficult task in 3 minutes. But we realize that we know quite a lot about transformative change, but there are still a lot of knowledge gaps as well. And as we heard here, there is no grand theory of change. So we think there is some kind of power in just having these discussions together. And I think we can learn a lot from talking to each other. We need to continue doing that. So one of the things we would like to send with you is that if you have ideas for how we can continue these collaborations and conversations also with the National Committee, just let us know if there are other initiatives that we could think about or new possibilities for collaborations also beyond the committee. That would be super.
Yeah, because now we need to wrap up. So there's a lot of things to say, and we could go on with this discussion for quite a long time. That was clear. We can't do that now because we have to close in 2 minutes. But evidently the conversation needs to continue. So and we look forward to that. So I think that we can sum up with that, right?
Yeah.
And we save all the other notes for the next time. Okay. Thanks for coming.